Welcome to Latte with a Lawyer, a podcast dedicated to bringing you the stories of some of America's most successful lawyers, figuring out what makes them tick, how they creatively solve problems, and how others aspiring to be them can follow in their footsteps.
Okay, guys, welcome to another episode of Latte with a Lawyer. I'm your host, Jonathan Brickman, and today we have with us Loren Wolff from DBL Law in Covington, Kentucky. Welcome to the show.
Thanks.
Great to have you.
Great to be here.
So let me ask you, so just to get started with the show, to keep with our theme, I have to ask you, how do you get started in the morning? What's your favorite beverage of choice?
Coffee, strong, dark coffee with a little splash of milk to kind of cut the acidity, but it's just a hair shy of a black coffee.
All right. I'm actually, I've learned, including my mother, who's now will be 93 in a couple of days. She drinks black coffee. I mean, a lot of people drink black coffee.
No, I did. So I did this thing, like this was probably 20 years ago now, where I cut sugar for 2 weeks and dairy. And it was really interesting. That is one of the things that stuck, is that I'd always put like a little sprinkle of sugar and a little heavier in the milk. And I never put sugar in my coffee again. And my milk is just really, it almost looks black.
There you go.
Like once you go that way, it's hard to go. It's hard to go back.
Yeah, you can do it. I don't use dairy at all anymore. I use coconut milk, and I don't put any sugar in. So
yeah,
I'm off of dairy. Anyway, this is a very stimulating conversation. It's nothing to do with the law, but it's what powers you through the day.
That's right.
So tell us about what kind of law you practice.
I'm mostly a real estate lawyer. I kind of often refer to myself as a good old-fashioned dirt lawyer. But what we do at DBL and what I really enjoy is we work with businesses, and we keep clients for a long time. And our transactional group, we just work really seamlessly together. So, for example, a client called me, a new client, they were having a zoning issue. They were thinking about purchasing a building, and they were kind of concerned about the zoning. So they called me, can you help with this zoning? Well, I ended up helping them with the whole purchase, ended up helping them get incentives because they're growing jobs in the new location. And then, my colleagues who do more sort of tax, and they're a little more on the corporate kind of general business. They kind of helped with some of the operating agreements and some of those things. And so I really enjoy kind of dabbling, in sort of general business, kind of walking a company through a whole lease or growth. And I always say, just call me, I got you. It might not be me. I might hand you off to my colleague, but at the end, I really am a dirt lawyer.
Oh, good. I like
I
that.
love property law.
Wait, so you're representing the real estate developer or construction company, not the individual?
It really depends. I mean, a lot of what my clients are developers. But we also, I would say, it's probably about 50-50 helping developers or the business.
When you say the business, what do you mean by the business?
So like a company, so like say there's Northern Kentucky, because of our airport and the interstate 71, 75, that we have a lot of logistics companies.
Okay.
So, a company that's looking for a new location. And, it's going to be 1 million square feet. They need new infrastructure. They need to build the roads to get to that. And a lot of times those might be even joint ventures where you have a developer and the business kind of come together and buy the property and develop it. So it's really, our practice group is called Economic Development and Government Advocacy. And it's really that development piece, and it kind of can look different, but it's really, like 1 million square foot warehouse, and they want to get this project done, and kind of representing the parties and kind of getting them through beginning to end. And that's contracts, that's real estate, that's overall business structure, that's working with government entities on zoning, on, you know, getting the roads and the utilities, and just kind of all that from beginning to end.
Okay,
That's
that's
what we do
cool.
in our group.
Got it. Now I understand. Yeah, I was in the real estate business for a bunch of years, and in fact, I worked for a big Canadian bank that I did real estate finance, and I
Okay.
was heavily involved with, partnership agreements, mortgage agreements, those kind of things, and then was on the institutional real estate side where I was an asset manager for a big pension fund advisor.
Okay.
So I'm very
Yeah, so
familiar.
you kind of know all the different pieces. And,
Yes.
you know, we have a strong finance piece too. And we all sit together on the same floor. And we really we always are, the catchphrase that my partner Patrick and I use a lot is that we tag team, we don't double team. So you might see three of us on an email, but we always know internally who's kind of the point person. But then one of us might have to peek our heads up and, answer a question or kind of run with something. And
you sound like you love what you're doing. It's a well-oiled machine.
yeah, I do. I mean, that's a lot of what we do too, is mixed use development. So actually the building we're sitting in was from turn of the century, and used good clients to do the project with us. And just seeing these kind of projects, take an old building, turn it into something modern.
Yeah, that's cool. I
Contributing
love
to the
that.
community, and preserving a historic building, and I find that really fun and satisfying.
Agreed. So you probably dabble in your own real estate investments too now, don't you?
We really haven't, and we have. So I live in a house built in 1870, and we rehabbed it. But my husband and I had our own law practice for 10 years.
Okay.
And so we moved to Northern Kentucky, started our law practice, had our first kid, rehabbed a house, and then had two more kids all within 6 years. So
wow, that's a
we
lot.
really didn't dabble in anything except work and kids.
Taking care of your kids, right? I didn't know there were buildings that were even that old in Kentucky. I thought that was only the
so
north.
where we sit, and this is going to get real nerdy, so feel free to cut me off. But in Northern Kentucky, it was actually kind of the gateway to the West. So we have buildings from the 1820s. Like Lewis and Clark came through here.
Oh, I see.
John R. Roebling, that built the Brooklyn Bridge, built our Roebling Bridge right here that I can see, and it looks just like the Brooklyn Bridge. I mean, it was a bustling major metropolis in the 1830s, 40s.
No kidding. Wait, in Covington you're talking about?
Yes, the Cincinnati and Covington riverfront.
Oh, is it because of the river? Is that why?
Yep, so the Ohio River connects to the Mississippi. So anyone going west, this was essentially, in the 1820s, 30s, 40s, 50s, in that period when people were going west, this was the last stop before you were really just in the wilderness. And you could come, so the Ohio connects to the Mississippi, so you could go north or to New Orleans. So this was kind of
very interesting. I'll have to do a little bit of research on that now.
Yeah.
I'm interested in that. Interesting. So how did you get started in this kind of law? Why real estate law?
So I grew up in old homes in Indianapolis, and I worked in the state legislature in Indiana. I worked for 8 or 9 years before I went to law school, and I worked in the mayor's office in Indianapolis in 98, 99, 2000. And I worked directly with the deputy mayor for economic development and the chief of staff. And, economic development, a lot of people hear that term and they think a big company comes like a Procter & Gamble expanding, but really, it's so much connects to just quality of life, and it just really weaves into just
strategic. It's very strategic
in so many ways. Yeah. And just seeing how communities develop, and I was one of those people in college. I was a history major, but I actually really enjoyed learning the history. And so when I went to law school, I always thought I would be in economic development in some capacity. I just really enjoyed it, seeing projects kind of come together and seeing how it impacts the whole community. I've always gotten a lot of satisfaction out of that. And then when I went to law school, the property, it was just, I really like property law because I thought, oh, this is so interesting. It's like the law and history. And I always found history so interesting, real estate just always kind of made sense to me. It's so, I'm sure, it's so based in just history and how we value property and ownership. And so when and my law school in Chicago had a real estate LLM. So there were just all these real estate.
You went to UIC? I was looking. Where'd you go? Yeah, okay. Right in the city. That's right in the city, which is a great architecture.
And so I just got to take real estate classes taught by real estate lawyers all the way through. And when we started our practice in the end of 2007, it was really the foreclosure crisis was really picking up steam. And so our practice, my husband did bankruptcy and I did everything else. And we were doing a lot of bankruptcies. We call them people with stuff. So maybe they owned a business or, they call them no asset cases when it's someone's just got a bunch of credit card debt and they don't own anything else. We didn't do a lot of those. So we were, at that time, it was people that owned some real estate. Maybe they owned a couple investment properties. Maybe they owned a business. So my husband would do the kind of the bankruptcy side, and then I would kind of do everything else. And there is just so much kind of just real estate because people they're like, oh, like, do you own property? And they're like, no, but I did inherit a share of a farm from my grandma, so just kind of, it can be very real estate heavy, and especially the asset cases we were doing. And then I just kind of developed over the years some developer clients, a lot of urban mixed use development, and you just kind of develop a practice over time.
Yeah. Interesting. Was there anyone in your family in real estate or law?
No, I mean, not really. Like I said, I grew up in an old house, and my dad is one of these, I call them hippie DIYers, in the 70s that like went to the Urban Core and liked tinkering on old houses. I always joke, like, I've never seen a toolbox not in the hallway of my dad's house in my whole life.
Yeah. No, that's fun stuff. I do the same thing. I'm not very good at it, but I do it.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So, all right. So real estate, I like that. And it sounds like it's a natural fit for you. Is there, so, I mean, give me an example like of a really interesting case that you worked on that kind of stands out.
That's kind of a hard question. I mean, I think, what I really enjoy, so just kind of the problem solving, I had my own practice for 10 years, which means I have my own business for 10 years. And I think that's something that kind of sets me apart when I'm talking to a developer or a business owner. I understand the math they're doing in their head. I can give you a perfect legal answer, but what they need is practical problem solving and someone to kind of weigh the options with. I really enjoy a client's got a big, mixed use development, and we are just it's like a puzzle of trying to piece it together so that it works. Maybe you're going to do retail on the bottom and condos or apartments on the top. And just, it's so fun to just so there was one I really love, and it's actually right outside my window, which is fun. So they had it was built, in the 1850s and converted it to townhouses, just very, very high end. And then on the end, it's like a big brick building, something you would see in like Brooklyn, or Manhattan.
Yeah.
And on the end, got a world famous muralist to install a mural. And so we were like, well, how do you preserve that? And does the owner on the end own the mural? Who owns the mural, and who's responsible for the maintenance? And there was parking right next to it. Who gets to own the parking? Is it, does each one get a space? And just kind of that practical.
Yeah.
problem solving. That was really fun because we kind of got the homeowners together. We ended up doing an HOA because they're not condos. So we just did an HOA. And then there is, we did a 10 years. So the one on the end where the mural actually exists, that unit owns the mural. But for 10 years after we created it, he can't basically paint over it or do anything. And they all share maintenance responsibilities
Got
for
it.
the wall.
Well,
And
let me ask you a question. With those kind of things, there is a lot of sort of negotiating, right? About, is there any litigation? Did you get into litigation ever?
No, I really don't. I mean, I've been involved in some litigation, and it's kind of boundary disputes, which are just, that never ends well for anybody. Nobody's ever happy. But no, we just keep at it until we get a
But your
solution.
practice, you've never had to go in a courtroom. You've never had to litigate a case.
I call it litigation light because it's always just kind of been motion practice.
Okay.
So whenever there's been any kind of litigation, because especially when you're talking about property, unless, and here at DBL, we do lots of litigation involving developers and property, and it gets to that kind of level, we just hand it off to our litigators, and we all kind of work together because we're kind of more the subject matter experts, and there's just a certain point where it's like, oh, if there needs to be, real litigation strategy, like there might be a trial,
You hand
like
it
that.
off.
That's time for a real litigator.
Okay.
But I think, especially with property, when you really when you have to look at somebody and say, well, kind of, okay, here's our options, and here's the non-litigation options, and here's the litigation. And the litigation option is probably going to be 3 to 4 years, and you're talking a minimum of $20,000. Suddenly people find a way to work it out.
Right.
Because it's just, at the end of the day, especially working with businesses and developers, especially developers, I mean, they'll litigate if they have to, but they've got their numbers, and they're like spending 5 years tying up this property and arguing about it and spending $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 in attorney's fees just rarely makes sense, and they'd rather just walk away from the whole thing if they have to.
Now I remember my days in real estate, there was always partnership disputes, constant. So and again, when you have a lot of money at stake, that's what I'm wondering.
Yeah, there is. And my experience with that is, when it really starts, unless there's those kind of investors and owners, they're just doing that math, like, I think I'm owed $500,000. Well, maybe spending $30,000 on litigation is worth it. And that's part of, when it starts to feel more like disagreement than agreement, that's kind of how that conversation looks. And we have those conversations a lot, well, here's your options. And often, if it really looks like litigation might happen, that's when we kind of hand it over at that part.
Got it. So, all right. So let me, we're a technology company. So I'm curious, what kind of technology do you guys use in your practice, and what's your view on that?
So having my practice for so long, so it's funny, I have a kind of a different view of it a little bit, because having my practice for so long, when we started in 2007, the cloud didn't really exist.
Right.
And it was so expensive and stressful. There were no options for us. So we bought this really expensive, really clunky version of QuickBooks, and, came on a CD, and I had to load it, and you had to pay for updates. And I had a little expensive external hard drive
Yeah.
And on Fridays, I would like back it up,
Yeah.
and then I would take it home and we'd put it in a safe at home. I mean, it was like nuts. So when, Dropbox, when Google there was a point where Google kind of transitioned for businesses.
Yes.
I was just all in, and it was really lucky. The ABA, they have a solo and small practice group, and I paid, and for like 3 years I paid to belong to the ABA because there were all these lawyers who were much more technologically savvy than I was, and they were following all this very closely. And that ABA was issuing kind of opinions. And at one point, it was Dropbox wasn't secure enough. And then they made some changes, and they were like, Dropbox is safe enough. And I was like, the next day I was like, Dropbox it is.
Everything's going to, yeah, it's amazing, the transition.
We went to Cleo, and I went to Cleo within 6 months of them opening, because I was like, it is so stressful. QuickBooks is not for lawyers. They've come a long way, but it is still not for lawyers. And so anytime there was something like that we could use, and in the cloud, to not have to worry about losing all our data and our client information, like that kept me up at night. That was such a worry for me. So I was very much an early adopter to the cloud. And at our firm, so DBL, DBL has grown a lot in the last 5 years. And so we're really kind of growing into, kind of what technology looks like. So, we've incorporated iTime. Some people are still using the old LMS system, which just makes my head hurt. I don't know how people use that. We've switched to Nextiva for our phones, and our internal communications, and we're still kind of growing into it as an institution. But I love technology, and I could go on and on all day.
Oh, good. That's great. Well, it's hard for people to change. It's hard for people to change, and it's usually generational, and it turns over eventually. But it's very hard for people to change their behavior, right, and learn something new, because it disrupts your work.
It is. It's so hard. It is so hard. And when I went for my own, I was at a prior firm for 2 years after leaving my own practice. And man, it really took me, and I love technology, but it took me 6 months until I really felt like my workflow, and that every time I saved a document didn't take 5 minutes. And
you weren't thinking about it. When it clicks, you just know what to do. You don't have to think about it.
Yeah. And luckily DBL uses all the same systems as my prior firm. I mean, they're kind of set up a little bit differently. Yeah. So there's a little bit of twists and turns, but it's basically the same. It's all the same software. So
excellent.
That was seamless.
Oh, good stuff. So we're gonna wrap it up here in a minute. But so, is there anything else you want people to know about you, and what's the best way for people to get in touch with you if they want to learn more about your practice?
Yeah, sure. Well, our website is dbllaw.com. Super easy. My email, lwolff, 2 Fs, @dbllaw.com. It's the best way to reach me. And, I think the thing I take most pride of at DBL is we really, I always say, like, just call me. I got you. We'll figure it out. Well, and we will be the first to send someone to another firm too, if it's not our sweet spot, or if we're not exactly what you need. I mean, we give, we're really good, knowledgeable attorneys, and I take a lot of pride that we also always try and help clients reach the practical solutions. And that's, problem solvers, will be a resource to you, and whatever you need. It might look different for different clients, but we always help them reach a practical solution, and I'm really proud of that.
Excellent. Well, if I come to Covington, I'm going to look you up for real.
Yeah, you should.
All right. Well, listen, thank you very much for spending time with us. Again, this has been Loren Wolff with DBL Law in Covington, Kentucky, Northern Kentucky. And this show has been sponsored by EmotionTrac with a C, and it's a virtual focus group platform. We use emotional insights to help people prepare for trial and mediations. Thank you very much, Loren.
All right, thanks. It was nice to meet you.
You bet.